Hello and welcome to this celebration of life for Robert Allen McFarlane. Thank you for joining us to celebrate Bob's 88 years of life. Bob was born July 11th, 1932 and died July 17th, 2020. I'm Paul McFarlane, one of Bob McFarlane's 4 children. And I'm sure I speak for everyone here when I say that I wish that we could be here together in person, where we can embrace each other and cry together and laugh together and remember Bob together. But 2020 had other plans. So we're all here together again, virtually, from many different places. Maybe some of us are in our living rooms. Maybe some of us are in our living rooms or in our kitchens, or maybe some of us are in bed wearing our pajamas. Dad would have liked that. I'd like to share a few comments on how we can watch and participate in Bob's celebration tonight. Please make sure you mute yourself and stay muted throughout the program. That'll help a lot. Use your speaker view feature when you see the main speaker on your screen rather than gallery view where you see a whole bunch of people in boxes like Hollywood squares. Use your computer or device volume to adjust volume as you need. In the event that the computer disconnect or the program disconnects suddenly, go ahead and quit or sign out of Zoom. Give us a few minutes to fix the problem and then sign in again. After giving everyone time to do that, we'll resume the program. Now, during the program, we ask that you share any remembrances of Bob or funny stories about Bob or how you met him, or by opening the chat box and typing in what you'd like to share. In Zoom, there's a button, if you're not familiar with it, called chat, and you can click that button. I think it's at the bottom of your screen. And then you can write what you like in that chat box and share it with everyone by clicking enter. And when you write something, please put your name first, because sometimes Zoom identifies folks by a telephone number or an email address, and that makes it confusing to know who wrote what. You can scroll up to the top of the chat box, and up at the top of the chat box, you should be able to find, if not now, in a few minutes, links to the detailed program, song lyrics, and Dad's obituary. You can open those documents by clicking on them while you're watching the program. Now I'd like to share just a little bit about what this celebration of life will be like tonight, what it looks like. We'll hear music, we'll hear from Bob's friends and family, we'll hear some of Bob's poetry, and we'll watch a beautiful slideshow of Dad's life. And following the slideshow, I'll read some of the submitted comments and remembrances from the chat. Lastly, we'll share more music and close with a virtual sing-along. After the conclusion of the program and a 5-minute break, family and friends who wish to do so can stay on to connect with each other at the virtual reception. We'll take turns speaking at that point and call on folks who want to speak. This celebration of life will be recorded and last about an hour and a half. The recording will be available to watch later on mykeeper.com website. Just search for Robert McFarlane. It'll be posted later as well. The chat remembrances we all make, and submit today will be saved as well, so you can read what other people have to say. And before we start this journey with Bob, I'd like to read a poem Dad wrote after he viewed the AIDS memorial quilt, which is an enormous memorial to celebrate the lives of people who died of AIDS-related causes. The AIDS quilt today is a 1.2 million square feet in size, and it's the largest piece of community folk art in the world. Here's the poem.
No, I don't know what to do. Should I text?
On viewing the AIDS quilt, April 1993. Robert A. McFarlane. This largest quilt on earth covers 13 football fields, has to be carried in segments. The patches vary in size, color, cloth. The designs jump out, grasp, won't let go. Those patterns woven in memory, in lives, stitched with family pictures, favorite songs, baby clothes, parents' tears. A baseball bat laid on a mitt, parts of a little red wagon, the hubcap from a Chevy, merit badge sashes, a child's scrawl, I love you, Mama, poems from a lover. I thank the attendant for the Kleenex. Listen to the names read aloud. The whole world sleeps under this quilt. Dad strongly believed that all people should be covered by the quilt of social justice. So let's begin Dad's celebration of life with a song about social justice written by Pete Seeger and performed by his friend Tom Rawson, If I Had a Hammer.
If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, a hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out warning, I'd hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. If I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring out danger, I'd ring out warning, I'd ring out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. If I had a song, I sing it in the morning, I sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out warning, I'd sing out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. I've got a hammer, and I've got a bell, and I've got a song to sing all over this land. It's a hammer of justice, it's a bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. It's a hammer of justice, it's a bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land.
My dad's parents, Robert Thomas McFarlane and Ida Mary McLaren, were Canadian. Robert Thomas, my grandfather, had served in the Canadian Infantry and then the Royal Air Force during World War I, and after the war, he attended seminary to become a Presbyterian minister. After he became a minister, the couple moved to the United States. There they had 4 children, Don, Robert, Marilyn, and Marion. Dad was born in 1932 at the height of the Great Depression, and the first year that was the year that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected to his first term as President of the United States. Life for the McFarlane family revolved around the rhythm of the church. Music, reading, writing, and poetry were all important parts of family life. Duty to family and humor were also very important. The McFarlane family was in Seattle when the United States entered World War II. During the war years, while my grandfather served in the United States Army as a chaplain and was stationed in Texas, the family moved to Texas for a time until my grandfather was shipped overseas to North Africa. The family then moved to Everett. After the war, the family moved to Bellingham, where my father attended Bellingham High School. Dad's sister, Marilyn McFarlane, will say a few words about growing up with Dad.
I've been thinking a lot about my brother Bob recently, casting my mind back for memories from our childhood and growing up together. And I turned to my cousin, Ann Ferguson, who was about Bob's age, and asked if she had any memories to share. They knew each other well because, especially when we lived in Everett, and we saw the Fergusons quite a lot, and they spent time together. We all did. And she said, yes, she did have some memories, and this is what she said. He was a lovely child, fun to play with, jolly, smart, and had a hearty laugh. I remember all those too, and more, because for me, he was my big brother, and I took for granted that he'd always be there, taking care of my little sister, our little sister, and me. And Don was there too, but he was older and gone a lot. And I think Bob felt a special responsibility, especially during those war years when Dad was gone. When Mother would go to church meetings, be out shopping, be busy, Bob would babysit. And not only that, he would play with us. He would do jigsaw puzzles with us, build a snowman, tell stories, tell jokes, remind us to do our piano scales and practice. And he held Sunday school classes at home when we couldn't get to church. He'd probably rather be off playing football or with his friends, but he was always good-humored about it. Even when he had to go find me when I would disappear, I'd be off on my roller skates or my bicycle, and he'd track me down, bring me back, never impatient, just doing what he was supposed to do. We grew up with music, piano lessons for all of us, church youth choir, and then Bob played the trombone and was in the marching band in high school, which I was impressed by. Later in medical school, he sang in a barbershop quartet called the Forceps Four, and our mother made quite elaborate jackets for them, which I well remember too. Then later there was more music. He played the banjo and there was singing. He and Betty held groups, music groups at the house and went to music camp, always music. When I was a young mother, I remember Bob and Betty being very good to me. We traded childcare, especially when we lived near to each other, and he'd give medical advice, take the kids' pulses, tell them to gargle with salt water when they felt cold symptoms, tell them to sing happy birthday when they were washing their hands. Once he brought polio vaccine on sugar cubes to the house. And when one of my daughters had surgery, he was in the hospital to visit her, to reassure her that everything would be fine. He was still doing what he'd always done, being a good brother, and in a lighthearted way, jolly, as Anne said. He always sent me funny birthday cards, really funny ones. And he gave me Betty's bicycle so that we could go bicycling together and after she had died, and that was great. We had just had some really fun times. And we had continued to have get-togethers, family meetings, parties, dinners, summer picnics, and of course, Boxing Day. And we'll carry that on, but it'll not be the same. It will feel different without him. He had a rich, full life and left us with some great memories. And he was a wonderful, much-loved brother. He'll be sorely missed, and I wish him fair winds and smooth sailing.
Thank you, Aunt Marilyn, for those stories and thoughts. Hello, everyone, and again, welcome, and thank you for being here. My name is James. I'm the fourth child of the McFarlane family. Many of you know our dad was a doctor, a thoracic surgeon to be exact. He attended OHSU Medical School, otherwise known as Pill Hill, and when it was the University of Oregon Medical School, there in Portland. In 1960, he got his first residency in Detroit, Michigan, and returned there in 1965 for a surgical residency. In 1967, he took an opportunity through our church and was the chief surgeon for the Presbyterian Hospital in Tabriz, Iran. We lived there about 2.5 years. In 1970, our family of 6 returned to the United States, and Dad was offered a position at Kaiser Permanente in Portland and worked mainly out of the Best Kaiser Hospital, now Adidas World Headquarters. He was with them until retirement, the year 2000. He held many titles, including Chief of Surgery, Director of Education, And then as he got closer to full-time retirement, he was the co-director of the surgical residency at both Best Kaiser and Emmanuel Hospital. Because our father's love for medicine and always striving to heal the sick, even in his passing, he is still doing just that. Dad donated his body to science, whereas completing the circle of life, he is now back at OHSU. Through his work at Kaiser, this brings us to our next speaker, Lynn Boos. Lynn knew Dad basically since 1976, and Lynn was on the medical administrative side of the hospital and worked with Dad on many different committees, projects, and boards. He also falls into the group of friends Dad loved to sail with. You will hear more about that shortly. Take it away, Lynn.
There are many tributes to be made about Bob McFarlane as a friend, as a professional colleague, and as a model for a living. But one tribute made now encompasses much of how Bob lived life during the 44 years that I knew him. He served as a trustee on the board of directors for Community Services Incorporated for 20 years, which is a nonprofit corporation serving adults and children with intellectual and developmental disability challenges. And I managed that corporation after retiring from Kaiser Permanente. As a trustee and a physician, Bob continually offered his knowledge and his advice to other trustees and to me about the neurological and other physical conditions that caused abnormalities in the lives of our clients. So Bob always asked purposeful questions and was prescient about the likely outcome of board and management decisions. But Bob added value to every meeting with his optimism, often expressed with warm humor, comments that were witty and funny, poetic sayings, and encouragement for both organizational growth and the personal growth of employees of CSI. Bob knew and lived his personal values, but was always open to hearing other values from people that he liked and lived around. He was always prepared for meetings and events, but his engagement was never about himself, as he was always humble and respectful toward others. Bob lived life so well and was dedicated to making life better for others. You sail on, Bob, in the hearts and the minds of those you left behind on your current journey. May there always be fresh winds to keep your sails full and calm waters for that voyage. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Lynn. Well, besides work, Dad loved the great outdoors. He enjoyed fishing, especially with his older brother Don when they were younger. He liked to hike, he loved to backpack, and camping was a big hit with the family. He cross-country skied, climbed mountains, and flew planes. He was an outdoor enthusiast, that's for sure. But what he loved the most was being on the water. He loved to sail, whether that be on the Willamette River and its fresh water, or out in the open sea with the salt sea splashing on the deck. He was always at home on the water. Through years of his love for sailing, he formed many strong friendships and loyal bonds. We are told that many of his crew enjoyed their time with Dad, listening to his jokes, hearing a story or two, and eating whatever he cooked up in the galley. One of those friends, pictured here, wants me to share these words with you. My name is Dave Baguki, and my tie to Robert McFarlane was 40 years of sailing. The highlight of our sailing history was a 6-week circumnavigation of Vancouver Island with Tom Hussey. In addition, Bob helped me on several occasions to sail my boat from the mouth of the Columbia River to the entrance of the Strait of Juan to Fuca, Canada, or vice versa, a trip taking about 24 hours. It was on one of these coastal trips I felt Bob and I became soul brothers. It was 3 a.m. in the morning, and Bob and I had the deep morning watch. It was pitch black with heavy clouds, and there wasn't any hint of moon or stars. He and I sat in the cockpit and drove the boat south by GPS, about 20 miles offshore. We couldn't see where we were going or even each other, so we started talking to fill the space. We talked about our lives, our families, our jobs, our loves, our hates. We talked about our death and how we wanted to go. We talked about things most important to us, and the darkness wouldn't stand any falsehoods. It took 3 hours for the sky to lighten up, and in that time, we connected as brothers. Thank you, Dave, for sharing that story. That was nice. Another one of Dad's very close friends was Tom Hussey. Dave made mention of him as well. Now I'd like to turn it over to Tom, who will talk a little about our dad.
Good afternoon. I am Tom Hussey. I came to know Bob shortly after I began working for Kaiser Permanente in 1970. Bob had some sailing background with the Willamette Sailing Club, and George Robinson, another Kaiser Permanente employee, owned a small sailboat on the Columbia. They in turn knew Horace Neely, a prior Kaiser Permanente employee, who owned a boat that was berthed in Seattle. And they were wrangling to put together a men's sailing trip in Puget Sound. Contacted Horace and arranged to charter his boat, and then I was approached. They had heard that I had some sailing experience. This was my first of many trips sailing with Bob. Well, that was the beginning of a long and fast friendship with Bob. We sailed often. We met for lunch. We met for a wee drop, which later I learned was Scottish for a drink of beer or scotch. Bob and I began talking about an adventure that had long been on my bucket list: to sail, to circumnavigate in a sailboat, Vancouver Island, which is a major trip. It's 350 miles long, and it's in exposed ocean. Well, Bob was all in, I was in. We had the will and we had the time, as we were both retired. But we were short one thing: we didn't have a boat. As it turns out, Dave Baguki, who was a friend of Bruce Huntworks, and had sailed with us on some of these Kaiser trips, did have a boat. Just what we needed. So we began planning the trip, knowing that it was going to take 4 to 6 weeks, thinking about the charts and the gear we would need. And then we ran into a bit of a problem. Betty, who was struggling with her dementia, was not doing well, and Bob announced that we should go alone, go without him. The answer to that is no way. We postponed, and we will wait for you. And we had departed about a year later, late in August of 2005, for our counterclockwise rounding of Vancouver Island. This was an amazing outing experience. The scenery is magnificent, the desolation is incredible, and the adventure was everything. So we sailed north up the east side of Vancouver Island, which is all protected water, lots of bays and harbors and islands. And then we reached the north end of Vancouver Island. We worked our way south, stopping at the various harbors and bays along the way. We needed to keep on pressing south, even though we were tugged to not, because it was so beautiful and so many things to see and do. But we had to get to Tofino by a certain date, because Bob had a charter flight from Tofino out. Now, where was Bob going? The fact was, Bob was flying to Seattle, and then to Portland, and then to Black Butte for James and Julie's wedding, which he attended and then flew back. And he met us some 50 miles south where we dropped him off, and we met him at Eucalypt, another fine harbor on Barkley Sound. And then the final leg of our trip was sailing down the south side, sailing south down the west coast of Washington into the Columbia River and up into Portland, and we went to joining our other lives. Well, all of us who sailed with Bob and know him have fond memories of times together, and we of course miss him. However, trust that he will not be forgotten, and we will, with regularity, raise a glass to toast him. Hear, hear, Bob McFarlane. God bless.
Hi, I'm Anne, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of my dad's involvements outside of his full-time work as a thoracic surgeon. Somehow Dad found time to write poetry and attend a poetry workshop up in Port Townsend at a place called Centrum, where he would spend a week or so taking pen to paper and just getting creative. He also loved music, and he spent some summers at a place called Puget Sound Guitar Workshop, which is also PSGW. My dad liked acronyms, believe me. He was a person, though, that cared so deeply about making change happen, or being the change you want to see in this world. And he served on many boards with many different organizations. I don't even know how he found the time, but he did this. And two of the organizations that he was very deeply involved with were Physicians for Social Responsibility and PSR, and the Hanford Advisory Board, which would be looking at the effects that a nuclear power plant might have on the population, folks like us. He was also involved in his missionary work, and when he returned, he served on some social justice committees at two different churches, 2 different times. So First Presbyterian Church was the first one, and then Centenary Wilbur Church was the second one. So all throughout his life and different points of his life, he was an activist, and he was a creative activist, which led him to meet other creative activists, such as our next speaker, Tom Rawson. And one thing I like to say about my father also was that he was a gifted speaker, and he was a great organizer, and he got along so well with people. They liked having him on the committees. He made meetings fun, I'm sure. And one of the speaking events that he would do often was with PSR, Physicians for Social Responsibility, and not to get my acronyms mixed up. And so he would speak about, they would have an annual event that commemorated the atomic bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so my dad would often attend peace marches in the Portland area, and he cared very deeply. But back to Tom Rawson. Tom Rawson is a musician and a fantastic creative activist who is involved in the Oregon Fellowship of Reconciliation, which was yet another organization that my father found time to be involved with. And they met at Seabeck, Washington. Oddly enough, I just have to make mention of the fact that Seabeck was a place that my dad had attended as a child. So Seabeck was a place that he would go to as an adult family, a dad with his kids, and it was a place that he went his whole life, basically, nearly. And it was a very important a meeting of the minds, you could say, because then these two joined yet another organization, which Tom doesn't know about this organization yet, but I like to call it, and I have to read this, I'm sorry, but I like to call it the Brotherhood of the Banjo-Playing, Peace-Loving, Organizing Joke Tellers. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce our next speaker, who will talk about Dad, Tom Rawson.
Hi, my name is Tom Rawson, and just like Bob McFarlane, I am a banjo-picking peace activist. And it's been my great joy and privilege to know Bob for about 4 decades. I first met Bob through the Fellowship of Reconciliation, international organization working for peace and justice. I met Bob at the FOR's regional conference at Seebeck, Washington, where once a year peace activists from all over the Northwest get together working for peace and justice. And when I think about Bob, I think about optimism, selflessness, really bad puns, which of course means they were the best puns. But mostly when I think about Bob, I think about the fact that Bob checked most of the boxes, if not all the boxes, of privilege. And yet years and years and years before those of us of privilege were being asked to let go, get out of the way, and listen to others, Bob was letting go and listening to others. Bob genuinely wanted to hear other people's stories, wanted to learn from the experiences of other people, and wanted to incorporate those experiences into his work for peace and justice. So I'm very, very grateful to Bob for the example he set for me to follow. And we're going to miss Bob big time. But we are so much better off for having traveled with him. Thanks, Bob.
International experiences greatly shaped our dad and our whole family. His mom, Ida Mary, was Canadian. Dad spent some time when he was 16 working on his uncle's farm in Alberta. He grew up regularly visiting BC since the McFarlanes, his mom's side, were all from that area. And when he joined the Marines, he was sent to Korea and Japan and worked with orphans from the war. He wanted to serve internationally, and our family prepared to go overseas for 6 months in Stony Point, New York. And then we moved to Iran for 2.5 years for the Presbyterian Church. My parents were medical missionaries working, and my dad worked in a community hospital in Tabriz, Iran for 2.5 years. Well, 2 years there and 6 months preparing in Tehran. That period of time had a profound impact on Dad and on all of us. And Dad formed lifetime friendships from this experience. So I would like to now share some remembrances from one of our dearest family friends, Marianne Gilhaus, better known to many of us as May. And she lives in Ada, Holland, and can't be with us tonight, but wanted to share some memories of Dad. So these are the words of May, or Marianne. In memoriam of Robert Allen McFarlane. We met in Iran late 1967. The McFarlanes were a young family with 4 kids, ages 9, 7, 5, and 3. Bob became chief of surgery in Tabriz Christian Hospital, and I, May, Marianne Gilhaus, from the Netherlands, was a staff nurse in the same hospital. Later on, I became director of nursing. We worked hard, very hard, because the hospital was always understaffed and the wards and clinic waiting rooms were always full. Professionally, Bob at times was not too happy there. He missed his thoracic surgical work. One memory pops up. One night shift, Bob and I were attending a lady in the delivery room. It was a very difficult delivery. I asked Bob, if you could get that baby out of her chest, you would do it, right? He answered, you bet I would. He was a good doctor. The patients and the staff liked him a lot. Always friendly, ready for a joke, and good-natured. In short, a man to love and rely on. During our stay in Tabriz, I became more or less a member of the McFarlane clan. I stayed with them often. They took care of me when I was ill. And friendships when one lives abroad, far away from friends and family, mean a lot more than in normal circumstances. In May 1970, the hospital closed due to lack of funds. After we all left Iran, we kept in touch by letters and visits. Through the years, I saw the children grow up, and we all spent many vacations together. Portland and Oregon became very dear to me. Winter Lane a second home. Bob took me to trips on his boat took me out for trips on his boat, showed me Portland from above, flying the plane. In 2002, I helped them move from Winter Lane to Terwilliger Plaza. In 2003, Bob and Betty spent some days in Holland, and it was a real treat for me to have them as house guests and show them my country. When Betty's Alzheimer's progressed, Bob became her full-time caretaker, and I was impressed by his immense patience and loving care. And when Betty went to the courtyard, he visited her every day at lunchtime to help feed her. I witnessed that many times and was moved by the way he took care of her with so much love and dedication. Bob and I lost touch after his marriage to Victoria, but each year on my birthday, he mailed me the same message. Happy birthday, May. Hope you are well and enjoying life. Have a great day. Cheers, Bob. A lovely man and a caring friend has passed away. He will be greatly missed. I will miss him and his yearly birthday message. May Marianne Gilhus, Holland. Thanks, May. Dad was also a central figure at any family gathering. He was always the focal point in the room, a huge personality. He loved people and loved celebrating with those he loved. When he married my mom, Betty Ann Hall, he immediately became an integral part of the Hall extended family, offering love, support, and many bad jokes to that side of the family too. I'd like to share some words from Grace McMichael, Bob's sister-in-law, who along with her husband Morton was very close to Dad. Here are the words of Aunt Grace. Bob, my big sister's husband, was part of my life for many years. We shared so many laughs and good times, some sad times too. He was such a great addition to the Hall family gatherings. A favorite memory. When I was in my late teens, Bob and Betty lived in a small house above the med school where Bob was enrolled. I stayed with them for a while. One day we were out and about and Bob said, "There's something at the med school I want to show you." He seemed rather excited. To my great surprise, he showed me his very own cadaver that he had just been assigned. It was like we had a new member of the family. Bob was a very special man. I miss him. So thank you, Aunt Grace, for this memory of Dad. As you heard earlier in this program, Dad donated his body to OHSU to further scientific research. He, of all people, would appreciate your story, Grace, and the fact that he's continuing to make a difference today. Here to share more memories of Dad as a part of the extended Hall family is Suzanne Klassen. Suzanne was Betty's first cousin. Suzanne's mom, DJ, was the baby sister of Betty's mother, Frances Hall, and she was very close to Bob and Betty throughout her life.
I'm Suzanne Klassen, and I'm Bob's first cousin by marriage. I was at Bob and Betty's wedding in Vancouver in 1955. Bob and Betty brought their 4 children to Grants Pass for family reunions with the big Jones clan. I have read letters written by my mother about those visits to Grandpa Jones on his little farm and to all the aunts and uncles living in Southern Oregon. Bob and Betty were very brave to travel with 4 little kids to keep connected to the many relatives. Throughout the years, I spent many significant moments with Bob and Betty. I recently wrote a brief message to Bob, thanking him for inviting me to come stay with his family when they lived in Iran. Can you imagine what courage and commitment Bob and Betty had when they moved their family to Iran in the late 1960s? It was a life-changing experience for me at age 21 to travel alone to their home in Tabriz and to stay with them for 2 weeks in such an interesting country. I stayed close to Bob and Betty through the 1970s and 80s, always admiring the work they did to support each other as they grew from their very young marriage to their long-time marriage and child raising and into their musical and political lives. They were a couple I loved and admired. I have a very distinct memory of being in the middle of labor with my daughter Annika at Kaiser Hospital and probably having quite a contraction when in popped Bob to say hi with that wonderful grin on his face. He was not only a dear relative, but also did 2 surgeries on me when I had a couple of breast biopsies. They were all negative for cancer, so that was great. And I always appreciated that he took care of me during these stressful experiences. Another memory of Bob was during the 1970s when he read the book called The Male Machine. It was popular at the time as men were questioning their roles, and this book talked especially about how lonely men were because they couldn't develop deep, open relationships with other men due to societal expectations for male behavior. I always valued the personal work that he did throughout the time I connected with Bob and Betty. Bob had such a great laugh, and my mother just loved it when he told jokes using his Scottish brogue. My mother adored Bob. She moved to Twilliger Plaza in 2004 onto the same floor as your parents at the plaza, with hopes that she could somehow help Bob as he took care of Betty after her Alzheimer's diagnosis. It seemed to us that Bob was truly dedicated to taking care of your mother through those many, many years of very sad and difficult commitment. I want to let you know that you have been terrific children to your dad, and he was a very, very lucky guy to have you for his children. Take care of each other through these complicated times in our world. My heart is full as I think of your dear father, and I appreciate celebrating his life, which was filled with dedication and commitment to the world. I love you.
Thank you for those comments about Dad, Suzanne. In the last decade of his life, Dad entered a new chapter. In 2008, Dad met Victoria Krish at Twilliger Plaza, where he and my mom had moved in the early 2000s after leaving their longtime home at Winter Lane. Victoria was a nurse in the Terrace nursing care facility of Twilliger Plaza, which is where Mom spent the last few years of her life. Victoria and Dad struck up a friendship and shared a lot of common interests. Victoria, for example, encouraged Dad to volunteer at a community clinic. Betty died from Alzheimer's in 2009, and in 2010, Dad married Victoria. They then split their time between their homes in Beaverton, Oregon, and Walla Walla, Washington, with a few trips to Taylor Bay at the Kitsap Peninsula until that was sold. They enjoyed many activities together, including a wonderful trip to Maine soon after their marriage. They enjoyed conversations, jokes, picking blueberries, tending their gardens and their chickens. And they were also able to spend quality time with Tristan Rupert, Victoria's son, who also lives in Walla Walla, working on garden and house projects, making music, and generally just enjoying each other in life. As most of you know, Bob and Betty had 4 children. First came Anne, then Paul, then me, and then James. So now the 4 McFarlane kids would like to share some memories of their dad.
Dad's heart encompassed many loves. He loved the wilderness, hiking on the trails, sailing on the waters, and plucking the strings of a banjo. He loved taking a pen to paper and writing poetry about the many people in his life. He always had time for a joke, and with a gleeful grin, he would deliver the punchline and then laugh right along with you. He was a master storyteller, and his children loved it when he read aloud to us from Laura Ingalls Wilder's series, Little House on the Prairie. Dad had a very playful spirit and encouraged the fun in our household. He built us a backyard play fort in Detroit, Michigan, a favorite yard for the neighborhood kids to play in. He was a bit of a crooner, too, and he would often sing us a bedtime song. I thought my dad was so talented, and I enjoyed every note. From the time I was a little girl, my dad was there in my life, listening, soothing, caring, and especially making me laugh. Anytime I was too worried or scared, there was Dad helping me through. I seldom saw him angry, at least not until I became a teenager. Looking at the numbers growing up, we were poor, and yet it always felt like we had everything we needed, especially love. During our time as a missionary family with the Presbyterian Church, we lived in the Middle East in the country Iran. During that time, we grew so close as a family. Dad always managed to overcome any language barriers with his compassion, his determination, and and his determination to understand and his disarming laughter. Everyone seemed to like my dad, and the world seemed to be a good place with him in it. He was quick to reassure you and let you know it was going to be all right. He always wanted to take care of those around him, and he wanted to make each person feel special. One thing that I need to mention in regards to my dad is the legendary Ogo Pogo. And the reason that this was special to our family is it signified a token gift of sorts. So it could be as simple as sending a rubber band or a paperclip included in a letter to Dad when he was serving in the United States Marine Corps in Korea in the 50s and writing Ogopogo. And that was something my father's father started and no doubt put a smile on my dad's face back then. It evolved to gifts from the dime store, or as we call it now, the dollar store. And my dad would give little gag gifts as Ogopogos. Once, as a very little girl, I was lost on the beach and crying, and my dad found me and had his hands behind his back. You'll never guess what that little Ogopogo turned out to be. A sandy slice of watermelon. I was still upset, but so glad to see my dad again, and so the tradition continues, and all my coworkers and friends know about Ogopogos. He is iconic, my father, in the sense that he was influential, recognizable, and if not somewhat revered, and Dad will always hold a special place in my heart, and I imagine in your heart, and I'm overcome with loss, yet I know he will always be loved.
Dad was funny. He was really funny. He had an amazing repertoire of jokes, and he always told jokes. Even when his jokes were bad or fell flat, or he told a pun that didn't go over very well, he was funny. He loved words, and he loved wordplay, and he loved puns. When he said goodbye, he'd often say, "Write if you get work, and hang by your thumbs." This was the closing line of a radio show, the Bob and Ray Goulding radio show from the 1930s that he watched when he was a boy. Humor was important to Dad. He had an infectious laugh and took obvious delight over any joke. His accents were spot on and hilarious. Dad was more than fun, he was smart. He was quick to grasp issues and zero in on the crux of an issue or a problem. He was kind and he was patient. Dad was a wise man as well. When I would have a problem, he'd help me think it through. And often he helped just by asking me incisive questions and letting me figure out the answers. Even when I made mistakes, and I have to admit this was a regular occurrence, at least for a while, Dad would pick me up, dust me off, and give me words of encouragement. Dad was always curious. He had an incredibly broad base of knowledge. He knew something about so many different things. And if he didn't know about something, he always wanted to find out. Dad didn't have much use for pretense. He was a chest surgeon who drove an old VW bus. He kept stuff forever. He had an old rugby shirt, an orange and blue rugby shirt that he had for about 25 years. He didn't care much about stuff. And he often quoted comedian George Carlin's routine about having too much stuff. What was important to Dad was people and relationships and nature. Tonight we've heard some wonderful stories from a number of people about those relationships, so I'd like to say something about nature. Dad loved the outdoors. When we moved back to the U.S. from Iran, we started backpacking when I was 11. We went on many backpack trips, including the Olympics, the Mount Hood National Forest, the North Cascades. He went on many of my scout hikes, including 50-mile summer hikes that our troop used to do. Some of my favorite memories are of times on the trail with Dad, walking together and solving the problems of the world, marveling at the way a cloud blew over a ridge, or the juicy ripeness of a salmon berry, or just suffering together through a rainstorm. A backpack with Dad wasn't a backpack without some level of suffering. Once in 1972, on an overnight backpack trip in Eagle Creek in the Columbia Gorge, we ran into two skinny backpackers with huge backpacks. It turned out they were hiking the Pacific Crest Trail from Mexico to Canada. This seemed like the adventure of a lifetime to me, and a dream was born. Much later, in 2019, I realized that dream and hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. Dad told me he always knew I'd do it someday. Every morning on that hike, as I'd start down the trail, I could hear my dad's voice saying, "Lead on, Macduff," which he'd always say every time he wanted me to take the lead, which was almost always. Dad loved mountains. He loved the ocean. He loved Forest Park. He loved the Japanese gardens in Portland. He loved road trips. He loved place names, and he loved reading plaques. He loved life. He loved the world, and he loved the people in it. Dad, you're one in a million. Write if you get work and hang by your thumbs.
Well, I'm Sarah McFarlane, and I would like to share a little bit about my dad also. When I think about my dad, I'm eternally grateful for several gifts he shared with me. First, his curiosity and his passion for lifelong learning was an important gift. He loved the wit and wisdom of the written word. He was a poet himself, and I remember going into his office in the dark tunnel downstairs of Winter Lane and having him read to me from one of his favorite poets, another doctor poet, William Carlos Williams. He read to us most nights in Iran, and when we were young, when I was asked to bring in a poem that was important to me in 10th grade English class, I read The Raggedy Man by James Whitcomb Riley. And my teacher immediately asked if that poem had been read to me as a child. He could hear Dad's voice in mine. Dad knew more about geography, or just about anything than imaginable, and his regular questions, discussions at dinner, and his prodding to go look it up kept me learning all the time. In the car, as Paul just mentioned, we stopped to read every historical marker, and his curiosity and interest in making connections between people, places, and events was infectious. I can now proudly say that I almost always stop to read the historical markers, and as my girls can attest to, I take a very long time at every museum exhibit. I give a lot of credit to Dad for that. Music was another gift from both of my parents. Dad and I shared a particular love for the sweet sound of the human voice. Singing was always a part of our lives. We sang on the hiking trail, in the VW van, on those endless drives across Oregon at 50 miles an hour. Classics like Blue Moon, one of Dad's favorites, or Paper Doll, and hits of the 1970s like Bad Bad Leroy Brown, to which he had some fantastic dance moves if you ever saw that. Dad had a beautiful tenor voice, and he taught me how to think about pitch and harmony. I remember when I first started singing with my friends Lisa and Louise in a cappella group we called Everybody's Cousin. He was in the background during one of our first rehearsals, and we asked him for his feedback. He'd been a singer in the Four Steps Four and all these, and he loved to sing. He had a good voice. And after a lot of praise, he carefully commented that we might want to focus on pitch as we'd slid down an entire note. So thanks for your good ear, fine voice, and love of singing, Dad. I do carry that with me always. Another gift from Dad was his incredible work ethic and his willingness and desire to use his work to make a better world for all of us. I loved those quiet morning breakfasts together at 6 a.m. when I was in high school. We would be the only ones awake, discussing the day's news or quietly sipping our coffee in the tranquil haze of early morning. He would leave early and be gone 12 hours nearly every work day as I was growing up, and he loved his work. And his work extended beyond doctoring, and his involvement with the Fellowship of Reconciliation and Physicians for Social Responsibility, among other groups, helped shape my own interest in political activism too. I remember lots of excited phone calls home from college as Dad and Mom and I exchanged updates on our respective actions, where we were to try and end the arms race and fight for justice in Central America and South Africa, and just social justice movement work. And it was really wonderful. Dad's sense of humor and hearty laugh was yet another gift. He was more than fond of a good or bad joke, loved a really long shaggy dog story, which we all know, and he would roar at a humorous pun. I remember walking out of a movie theater with him once, and a friend of his stopped him, saw him in in the lobby and stopped him and said, "Bob, I heard you laughing in the dark and I knew it was you." He was just so distinctive, that laugh. In a dark movie theater, she could still figure out it was him. One time, he and Mom finally got to visit Hawaii, just the two of them. They'd never been before. They were super excited. I was 16, and when they returned, he had Ogopogos for us. He gave me a bright yellow t-shirt that had the words "High Fiber Diet Hawaiian Style" on it, and it had a picture of a bowl filled with mushrooms and marijuana leaves. I looked at Dad quizzically and said, "Thanks, Dad, but do you know what you just gave me?" When I explained it to him, he said, "Oh, I gave that to you because you're a vegetarian and I thought it was a salad." Well, we both laughed a lot about that. And I proudly wore that t-shirt for a number of years, mostly for home projects and gardening, but I did wear it a long time. Mostly though, Dad gave me the most important gift, which was unconditional love. And whether it was sewing up my cut toe while camping on the Black Sea in Turkey when I was 5, sitting on the couch to pore over the catalog for Mount Holyoke College before my freshman year, comforting me and holding me on his lap at Kaiser Interstate office when I was 22-year-old social worker who'd had a really bad day, or holding my hand as he held my newborn baby girl. Dad gave me and all of us love.
Hello, everyone. Jane's here again. As the last of 4 children, I had the opportunity to be the only one living home during the last 3 years of high school. Many of my fond memories of my dad were during this time when I would be sitting at the table and hearing about his day at work, what adventures he had planned next, or to hear his latest joke. I would often ask him for details on the surgeries he performed that day, partly because I was interested, but also because I wanted to see my mom get grossed out. My father was there pretty much every milestone in my life. And of course, at the time, when I was younger, I did not appreciate it as much as I do now. From patiently teaching me how to drive a stick shift while navigating the hills of Northwest Portland, to being a supportive parent and attending my sporting events. He was always there for me. Now, you can't talk about Dad without mentioning his sense of humor, as many have already tonight. I remember after one of my football games in high school, Dad came down from the stands to congratulate me. And when I thanked him for coming to the game, he told me, "If I can't be an athlete, I'll be an athletic supporter." That's Dad for you. And I still use that same joke with my son to this day. I remember Dad moving me down to college in Eugene and telling me about the importance of independence and the life lessons it can teach you. He really allowed me to have the freedom and autonomy to figure things out on my own while still being a great sounding board and support system. One time he came down for Father's Weekend at my fraternity, and we all went to a football game. My buddies and I snuck him into the student section, and he fit right in. A few minutes before halftime, when we were all getting up to head out to the tailgate area, Dad inquired about the halftime show. I sat back down and for the first time watched my school's marching band. I enjoyed every minute with my dad that day, and I could tell he loved seeing the trombone players march in formation, just like he used to do years ago. Dad was there during my professional life and always giving me a word or two of advice and some of his pearls of wisdom. Most importantly, he was there for my wedding day. Unfortunately, my mom could not be there due to her illness, but nevertheless, Dad was there and adding to the festivities in his usual way. His big grinning smile, larger than life laughter, and in his full Scottish kilt attire. I always felt that Dad was guiding me along the path during my days of growing up, learning the difference between right and wrong, teaching me about compassion, honesty, and kindness. As an adult now, with a young son, I've tried to pass along these traits and characteristics. And of course, we can't forget that special talent he had, a great sense of humor. I can tell you this, puns and jokes run rampant in our house to this day, all thanks to Dad. So thank you, Dad. Thank you for everything. We miss you. We love you. Thank you for all being here.
Okay. Thank you, James. Poetry was an essential part of Dad's life, both reading and writing it. He came from a strong literary tradition. His father was Robert Thomas McFarlane, and his father was a gifted writer and orator as a Presbyterian minister, and his mother was Ida Mary McFarlane, and she wrote beautifully and loved the written word and the arts, and she loved to share that with her family and her kids. And she would take her children in the 1930s down to the Seattle Art Museum on on Capitol Hill in Volunteer Park to see black and white Greek tragedies, for example. So Dad wrote a lot of poetry, and he was in a poetry writing group for many, many years. And as we heard earlier, he would go to Centrum. And he had more books on his shelves than you could count. It was really quite astounding. I'd like to share with you now a poem that he wrote called Angels, and he wrote this after his mother, Ida Mary, died. Angels by Robert McFarlane. Sifting through attic boxes, a picture of my mother appears as a girl, pretty, long dark hair with ribbon, lacy gloves, filmy white dress. I once told her she looked like an angel in that photograph. She said no. She believed in angels. In the influenza pandemic of 1918, isolated on the prairies, everyone in her family was sick. A sister died. One neighbor appeared with his wagon and team, carried wood, fixed broth, boiled water, bathed them, fed the stock, dug a grave. When my mother awoke, she saw him, wide-brimmed black hat, black coat and pants, no buttons, only hooks and eyes. He was tall, red-haired, bearded, gave a soft smile, lifted her with arms like a blacksmith and hands as gentle as wheat. She died at 83, believing angels had red hair and dressed in black. Thanks for a lifetime of poetry, Dad. Perhaps some of us now believe that angels wear kilt, have a scratchy gray beard, and love a good joke. We have several of Dad's poems in a link on the MyKeeper website. You actually have to cut and paste it, but the link is there. And if you're lucky enough to have a poem that you don't see in there, we would love to have it. And you could email it to James. He put his email on there, and we'll add it to the collection so other people can enjoy it. He was really quite prolific and talented. So now we hope you enjoy a visual tribute to Bob Dad, as we called him around here, in this slideshow.
Now we'd like to share comments and remembrances from all of you. And to start off, I'd like to share selected portions of a letter sent by Maura and Graham Richards, which are friends of the family and friends of my mom and dad that live in Tunbridge Wells in Kent in the UK. They met in 1978 when Maura and Graham were visiting the United States. We were, of course, invited to Northwest Winter Lane very quickly and met all the family. We soon got to know Bob also, and particularly his jokes, which were mostly awful. But Bob roared so much with laughter that everyone else joined in. We came back to the States several times in the next 10 years or so, and Bob and Betty came to the UK. In the States, I guess we stayed at Winter Lane with Bob driving, singing, and still telling the stories. Another year, they took us down to the West Country for Christmas. We had great times together. When we got the cottage in Scotland, they were among our first visitors, and of course loved it as we did. They came several times, and we drove all over the place and went out to the islands, which was wonderful. Bob, of course, insisted that he was Scottish, which I'm sure he was with a name like McFarlane. The last time we saw Bob was after Betty died. He came to Scotland and he was not in a good space. We were out cutting grass and he just dropped his clippers and burst into tears. He said, "I wish my parents were here. They would tell me what to do." At that time, of course, we didn't know about Victoria, and the next thing we knew, he was married. There is still a lovely pic in the kitchen. Bob was a great human being, a great friend, and though he was at a distance, we miss him terribly. But I will always be able to hear him roaring with laughter at those awful jokes. So a toast to his memory is in order here tonight, a compassionate, amusing, and lovely man. Our love, of course, to all the clan, Maura and Graham. So now I'd like to read some of the comments that we've had on chat. And so as I scroll down the chat, I can say we have one from Kristen Knapp. And Kristen says, I remember many days working as a house cleaner, babysitter for the 4 McFarlane children so Bob and Betty could have a weekend by themselves. It started shortly after they returned to the US in the house on Raleigh and then continued on Winter Lane. I enjoyed getting to know the whole family as I was also a world traveler, having lived in Bogota, Colombia, my junior year of college. The McFarlanes, both Bob and Betty, were so supportive of me that I felt safe to come out as a lesbian to them before I could tell my parents. They were older than me, but not as old as my parents, and as soon as we became friends, I found I could trust them. I admired the partnership of Bob and Betty's marriage and their social justice commitments. I loved all of you McFarlane kids, and I'm so happy to hear your memories of your dad. He was a very special person whose spirit will live in so many of us. Thank you, Kristen. Ellen Markson at Terwilliger Plaza writes this: Bob and Betty were my neighbors on the 12th floor of Terwilliger Plaza, and no one could have wanted better, loving, caring. No one could have wanted better, caring, loving, active, and intellectual and artistic for caring persons just down the hall. At our frequent floor dinners for the 12th floor neighbors, he began each dinner with a poetry reading or enjoyable tales of his and Betty's travels and adventures. Those of us who are still at the plaza will never forget Bob and Betty. They both made our lives much richer, and we love them. Thank you, Eileen. Let's see, we have one. Oh, from Robert says, I remember getting small gifts with an exclamation of Ogo Pogo and always being filled with joy. Thanks, Robert. Gail, I'm not sure how to say your last name. I think it's Kaune, Kaune. Many of us met Bob at Writers Camp Centrum. He was the one who got up early every morning and made coffee for us free writers. He never missed. He was inclusive and fun and added to any group. We missed him when his time at Madrona ended. Marie Eaton says, Bob and Betty were mentors to me in my early years. Julia Bascom says, Bob was my role model for a liberal MD father figure. He let me know that it was okay to be passionate about social justice when my conservative MD father called me a communist dupe. Thanks, Bob, miss you. Laura Smith Clausen says, guitar camp is where I met both Bob and Betty, but it turns out they've been good friends of my husband, Lynn's brother, Art, and his wife, Alice, when they all went to Lewis and Clark together. Flip Breskin says, Bob and Betty at guitar camp for so many years with guitar and banjo, bad puns, determination, joy, humor, and such love. We all adored both of them. Let's see, scrolling down. Pete Burgle says, haven't seen Bob for quite a while, but during the years I knew him, I enjoyed and respected him a lot. We had a great connection, Betty too. Thanks to his children who put this memorial together. Well, thank you, Peter. Let's see. I think there's a couple of short ones here. Julia also says, thanks, Sarah. Totally heard Bob's laughing voice while you shared. Allison Myers remembers the rugby shirt. I wonder, I wish I had it. Let's see. Laura Lee Newman says, wonderful to see the pictures and hear the stories. Marilyn says, many fond memories. Marilyn McFarlane says, many fond memories and a wonderful tribute. Kathy Newman says, Uncle Bob, the master of obfuscation for the sake of entertainment. Hi, dear. Hi, dear. Care for a cup of tannic acid? Plus, he could play the bagpipes. Let's see. Mason Bowles makes a comment on the shirt that Dad gave to Sarah from Hawaii. Bob gives Sarah a stoner t-shirt. Very funny. Thanks, Mason. Looks like there's a new message coming in from Teresa's phone. Teresa phone says, Uncle Bob was always the one who began singing We're All Together Again on Boxing Day. I will always remember our family uniting hands and singing together every year. Thank you, Teresa. All right, well, we've read some of the comments now, and I guess that'll conclude the reading portion of the evening. But remember, the chat comments are going to be saved, and you'll be able to find them along with everything else on mykeeper.com. Again, just search for Robert McFarlane, and you'll find all the materials relating to the program from him. And so now we'll move on to a little bit more music before we close. So we're going to hear another Pete Seeger song, Quite Early Morning, played by Dad's friend, Tom Rawson.
Well, don't you know it's darkest before the dawn? This thought keeps us moving on. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now, quite early morning. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now, quite early morning. Some say that humankind won't long endure, but what makes them seem so doggone sure? I know that you who hear my singing could make those freedom bells go ringing. I know that you who hear my singing could make those freedom bells go ringing. And so we keep on while we live, until we have no more to give. And when these fingers can strum no longer, and the old banjo, the young one stronger. And when these fingers can strum no longer, and the old banjo, the young one stronger. And though it's darkest before the dawn, this thought keeps us moving on through all this world of joy and sorrow. We still can have singing tomorrow. Through all this world of joy and sorrow, we still can have singing tomorrow. And though it's darkest before the dawn, this thought keeps us moving on. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now, quite early morning. If we could heed these early warnings, the time is now, quite early morning. The time is now, quite early morning.
There's a song that the McFarlanes sing at every family gathering to signify our connection and our love for one another. My dad usually led us in this song, and no matter if there were 5 people or 50, we would all join hands in a circle and we'd sing, "We're all together again." It goes like this: we're all together again, we're here. We're all together again, we're here, we're here. For who knows when we'll be all together again, singing all together again, we're here. So at this time, I'd like to ask you to virtually hold hands with all your loved ones and with all of us, and especially to hold hands with Bob McFarlane and sing with us, "We're All Together Again, We're Here." Now the words will flash on the screen and we'll go through the song 2 times. We're all together again, we're here. We're all together again, we're here for who knows when we'll be all together again, singing all together again, we're here. We're all together again, we're here. We're all together again, we're here for who knows when we'll be all together again, singing all together again, we're here. Well, thank you for that sing-along, and thank you for celebrating Bob's life tonight, and letting us be all together again. Remember, if you didn't get a chance to write a comment, or if you want to read the comments, or if you want to submit a memory or a photo or a funny story or one of Dad's poems, or if you just want to watch the program again, or if you want somebody else to watch the program, please go to mykeeper.com, search for Robert McFarlane, you'll find it, and all that stuff is there. And in about 5 minutes, when the music stops, we're going to have some music now and kind of an intermission, or this is the end of the program, but we're going to have a virtual reception after this, and the music's going to play for about 5 minutes. And when the music stops, we're going to, those who want to, family and friends, return for a virtual reception and have an opportunity to connect with each other. But thank you again for coming. And big virtual hugs to Bob Dad and to all of you from all of us. And Dad, Bob, we love you. Lead on, McDuff. Well, if I guess we're back now for the virtual reception. None of us have ever done this before, so we're really not quite sure how it works. It's so great to see everybody, and it's great that you all attend, and there's a Zoom memorial. I guess I know there's a hand raising feature, and people can raise their hands if somebody would like to talk. If you want to say something to somebody, you could possibly maybe unmute yourself, but if everybody tries to be kind of respectful and give a couple seconds so we don't get too many people talking over each other. We don't want it to be too shaloog. When we lived in Iran, there's a word in Farsi that became part of our family lexicon, and that word is shaloog, and basically it means chaos. So things might be kind of shaloog at the virtual reception. We're not really sure. It's an experiment. So welcome to the grand experiment, and it's great to see all of you. And if somebody wants to share, great. And if one of my siblings wants to chime in, chime in.
It could be like Boxing Day when everybody's talking over everybody else anyway. Salute, huh? Okay.
Paul?
Yes.
Well, I was going to suggest we could also use the chat, and people could mention in the chat. And it might, speaking as the public school teacher who's teaching remotely these days, speaking of shaloog and trying to figure out features to not have too much, maybe people could, if they have a story they want to share and you know how to use the chat, you could put your name in there, say, I'd like to say a story. But if you don't know how to use the chat, just unmute yourself.
Hey, I think that's a wonderful idea, Sarah. And I think I know just the person to kind of moderate the virtual chat. I think that would be you.
Okay.
So if you monitor the chat, and when people mention they want to talk, then you call on them. Sound good?
Yes.
You can also just raise your hand in the picture, and just say, "Hey, I want to speak." Yeah. That works. I go to Zoom coffee hours after church, and it works that way. And it's just everybody unmutes, and then you can kind of talk to each other, but you can raise your hand if you just want to say something. Well, it was a beautiful, beautiful service. I'm just so impressed. And I'm curious as to how you put this all together, having done memorials for both of my parents. And, we did them at a church. Of course, it was different, but I just was very impressed with how well put together this was, how much you each had to say, how together you were doing it. Really a lovely tribute to your dad.
And Anne, you wanted to say something to that? Oh, Anne, did you want to? You're muted.
Muted.
Yeah, Anne, I think you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me all right then? So I would just like to give a quick shout out to our tech person, Julie Calger, without whom we could not have done this without you, Julie. So I think you deserve to just, applause of a virtual sort. And thank you, Julie, for helping us through. But we did as swimmingly as we could. We did as much as we could on our own, but we couldn't have done it without her. So we had a tech person. And thank you. It's so good to see everybody.
Anyone else have a Bob story they want to share? Marie wants a story. Marie Eaton.
So I met Bob and Betty through the music community, both PSGW and the Northwest Women's Music Celebration, where Betty came every year that she could possibly come. And one of the most tender things for me is that after Betty's dementia diagnosis, she missed the music community greatly. And one of my dearest memories is the year that Bob sent Betty along with an attendant so that she could come back to the camp. And he also helped us endow a scholarship in Betty's honor at that camp so that other women could come to share the music that Betty loves so much. And they were such wonderful mentors and guides for Mary Ellen and me in our lives. We just so valued our friendship with both of them. So I just so value the way he supported Betty and her love of music and his own love of music shining through all of that. So thank you.
Thanks, Marie. That's so beautiful. Yeah, and you all were such a huge part of our life, and I love that we had a house where that could happen, and there was, to me, so much community built through song and music, and through just mentoring and friendship, and so thank you for that. Don Myers, you wanted to share a short story, you said?
I do. I have a short one. Bob was always so accepting. You know, I married into the family by marrying his niece, Allison. And I remember a few years back, one of his milestone birthday, and I never really gave him any presents at any other birthdays, but this time I had gone up to John Day and dug some fossils behind the high school in Fossil, Oregon. And I thought of Bob, and I brought him a fossil, one that I had dug up. And he looked at it, he looked at me, and he said, "You thought of me when you dug up a fossil?" And and he laughed that big laugh. And I just love Bob. He's a great guy. I miss him.
Two. I know one thing I was thinking, oh great, Louise, my daughter, wants to share.
I'm Louise, her daughter. I was gonna say that Grandpa had a really good reading voice, and when I was little, he would read a lot of books to us, but specifically we had a Magic School Bus book when they went to the spooky haunted house where they learned all about music. And I loved when Grandpa would read me that book because he made really silly sounds, because all of the instruments would make really silly sounds, and there was one kid who couldn't make his instrument work, so his instrument would make all these silly sounds, and Grandpa would make them really loud with his mouth. Specifically, the sound ploop is what I remember. And I would always run, and when he came to visit, and like greet him at the door with this book and like make him read it to me immediately. So that was my memory.
I should add that you too, Louise, have that McFarlane poetry thing because you love to write poetry too.
Oh, Margaret. This is true.
Margaret.
Hi, I'm Margaret. I would like to jump in and follow up on that memory. I remember when Grandpa sometimes, like when all the cousins would get together and Grandpa would read to us. You know, someone always, or not always, but usually got to sit on his lap. And I think I like physically fought everyone to get that seat. And then also I will never forget the feeling of like the like whisker kisses he used to give us. Like those were the best. Yeah, that's my memory. Can I be done?
Margaret, also following in the McFarlane literary tradition because you are now getting your what, where?
I'm in a PhD program right now in Connecticut for English literature and like Shakespeare.
So awesome. Dad would love it so much. Something you want to say? I'll say something about seeing some of the faces come into the Zoom room. As much as I could pay attention to that today, it was really fun for me to think about all, and actually building this memorial was really healing in a lot of ways. And it was great to spend a lot of Zoom hours with my siblings, but also we built the Google folder looking at pictures, but just remembering so many different parts of Dad's life and our life with that and the life before us. And it was fun to see faces coming in and represent those parts. And one of the things I was thinking about was my friends and kind of what Julia was talking about in the chat, but just how much of a place, a welcoming place I felt like our home was for our friends and our community, and that there were just great love and interest and always asking questions. Dad was always asking questions about our friends and wanting to know how they were 20, 30, 40 years later, and updates, and cared a lot about people. So that's something I always associate with my dad and my mom, but thinking about Dad and always wanting to know how people work. Grace wants to share something.
Hi, I'm hi, I'm on the other computer. Wait.
We have two computers in one room. Good.
Hi, sorry about that. I just wanted to share that Grandpa would he was good at like just deciding to send you a text and then doing it, or deciding to call you and then doing it. At least with me, like sometimes get a random text on like a Wednesday that would be like, oh, how are you doing? What's up? And we would never have very long conversations. I would tell him what I was doing that week or whatever, and he would tell me how the chickens were or something. But in March, I broke my leg and I went to Kaiser Permanente to have surgery to fix my leg. And when Grandpa heard about that, he texted me and was like, send me pictures of your x-rays. What did your doctors tell you? This is what I would do to heal. And so we had a lot of very long text conversations in March and April about my surgery. And he was telling me all kinds of stuff. And I could just tell that it was really exciting for him to be able to talk to me about that and share that with me. So I don't know a lot about surgery, and I wasn't actually very personally interested in my own surgery, but Grandpa sure was. So that was fun. That's it.
I think cousin Allison wants to share a story, I think.
I wasn't, but I could say something. Since you called me out.
Maybe I misread it.
That's okay. I was thinking just how lovely it is to see all of your beautiful faces and how much I wish we could actually be together. But this is definitely a nice option, not just share, call or write, but actually see all of your beautiful faces and share these stories. I have never not known my Uncle Bob. I met him at my birth and I've known him ever since. And so I don't know what it's going to be like to not have him in the world. It's been a hard year.
Yeah, well, and our love to you too, because you and your sisters just lost your dad too. So it's been a hard fall, summer and fall. So lots of love to share around for each other right now. Big love to you and your sisters. I think that Glenn wanted to share a story.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not a family member. I'm an old friend of Bob and Betty, and they always were so much fun, had such good wit. And I know them through the peace movement. And I arrived just a few minutes ago in this thing because I was teaching a workshop on nonviolence. And nonviolence needs to be fun as well as politically astute and compassionate and stuff. And Bob and Betty were so good at making everything fun and community building, which is what we need. And so I just wanted to express appreciation to the family for pulling this together. I'm happy to participate, even though I'm not a relative, but the peace community and extended pals are part of family in this way. So thank you all and blessings on you all.
Thank you. That's so lovely. Thank you. Yeah, because the peace thing, yeah, so many memories of going to CBEC and being a kid and like getting trained in nonviolent civil disobedience and going down to the train tracks or going over to Bangor. It was like such a childhood education because how to really love all people. And it was really valuable. Julia wanted to share.
Yeah, one memory is from your wedding, Sarah. And the evening was coming on and I was dancing with Bob. And I had a special fella there and I wanted to ask him to check this fella out and tell me what he thought of him because things were getting a little more serious. And so, of course, he joked a little bit about that because what a strange position to put him in. But I was always putting him into that. Off and on, I was putting him into that, like I said, father figure role model. And he stepped right up to the plate so many times. So although it was kind of ludicrous, he could go from being the funny guy to being the sincere guy in just a minute. And he could get right there with you and talk with you and get deep and reassure you and then give you a big hug and get you laughing again. And that's what he did in that moment at your wedding. And just a great guy. What can I say?
Thanks, Julia. Julia spent a lot of time at our house. So we were together a lot in high school. Thanks. Abe, you wanted to share something too. Are you there, Abe?
Yeah, I just wanted to unmute without holding space. So yeah, there's just so many memories and it's always nice when you get like a little piece of a memory. Like I keep this on my phone, for example, of a very, very small child that loves his grandpa very much. And, as we went towards the future, some things changed and he became more rare. And sometimes it was hard to appreciate like exactly what we had. But the last time that I saw him was at Christmas when we were at Trillium Hollow. And I was just sitting next to him watching him eat breakfast. And, of course, there was copious amounts of toast on his plate. And he was just smiling and happy. And I was watching him and just any of like my previous reservations that I'd had before about just the whole not getting to see him enough, or all these other things that I just wasn't satisfied with, that all disappeared, and I was just happy to be with him in that moment. And I'm glad that I reached that point, because I was like one iteration away from missing that completely. And so yeah, now whenever I see pictures of him, I always smile and think about how lucky I was to have a grandpa like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. So many memories of that. John Parker just wanted to share something.
Hey, Abe, nice to hear from you. Nice story, thanks. I'm married to Bob's younger sister, Marilyn, and we've been living together since 1980. And I was brought into the family like John Myers talked about. I married into the family at a different level, but the way Bob and Betty welcomed me made me feel at home with them. And of course, our values and appreciation for things happened to fit perfectly. But they were so loving and open and kind in a situation that was difficult. Marilyn had 4 children, she'd been divorced, everything had been, changed. But they were without equivocation, loving brother, sister-in-law, playing music, having a good time, meeting their wonderful kids who have turned into these beautiful adults. And it's been such a privilege to share your growing up together and seeing your lives evolve, and to be part of your family, to be with your mother and your father, who were truly gifted and wonderful people. And we should all aspire to something similar to Bob and Betty. Thank you all for doing such a nice job.
Yeah, reading some of the chat. Yeah, I'm kind of with several other people saying I haven't really confronted for myself what it will be like to have our singing time and not have Dad there to kind of pull us together, or to pull out the family history with copious numbers of photographs and some kind of organized piece. And it'll be a new world, but I feel really lucky to be a part of the world that got created to make all that love. So.
So I'll say another little something about that, Sarah. I just have found that after both my parents were gone, and that role fell to me to hold the family together, it's a challenge. I find it hard to do. And I hope that you guys will make the effort.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's I have to say, I was saying I found the real healing through putting this together, because I feel like it pulls us together as people, and we remember kind of where we're from, what's true to us, what's important. And one of the best things was actually hearing from people and knowing that, like I said, connecting back to all of these things that made us who we are. And so I appreciate that. And I feel that too, but I also feel like a little bit more empowered for that by coming together. So now more than ever in our world, right?
Well, and it's wonderful to have the grandkids also chiming in and seeing how this, understanding from personal experience, but also seeing how we can stay connected through Zoom, even if we're not even in the same state. And that's really a wonderful thing. That's a special thing. So we should take advantage of that. So I'm going to go, but I just thank you so much.
Oh, love you and miss you so much. You were a huge influence on us. You tell stories.
Love you, Kristen.
Scott, he may have signed off. I'm not sure. Did he already sign off? He's on the East Coast. He's our cousin. And are you still on, Scott, or did he pop? I can't see everything at the same time. But it's really late for him. It's after midnight. But he wrote a really nice piece in here, and it's so great to see him in here. Lori, did you want to say something too?
Sure, just that I knew Bob and Betty and your family from the Fellowship of Reconciliation, CBEC, conferences, and Bob was just the quintessential community maker there, you know, friendly. He wasn't a jump in front and call out attention to himself, but he participated and was full of joy. And I definitely admire the work he did with PSR and yes, PSR and I mean, just really good spirit. So I'm very sorry he's left us, and really grateful that I got to enjoy his humor, his music, and the love with your family, and how he took care of Betty. It was really super sweet. And so just gratitude and appreciation. And thank you very much for putting this together.
Thank you. Thanks for being a part of it. Any other stories or thoughts or anything anybody just wants to say?
I'd like to say something.
Yeah, Johnny, go ahead.
Sorry, my camera isn't working. I've been having technical difficulties on my side. But I just wanted to say, like, I was really young when he passed away, and obviously it was horrible, terrible what happened, and but I'm gonna remember Grandpa Bob always for the stories that he would after following Grandma Betty's passing, and I'd sit on his lap and he'd tell me stories of his adventures, and all the cousins would be around, and it was a really good time. And I know I've been distant. I haven't been as involved as I could have been, but I really miss Grandpa Bob, and I give all my blessings to him.
Thank you, Johnny. He loved you so much. He's so proud of you. Thank you. I think that somebody else said they wanted to say something. Now I'm getting lost here. Oh, Leslie. I think you're muted.
No.
You're not? Uh-oh. What's going on?
Wait, no, that's not.
Do you know sign language?
That's odd. Did you like do an unmute everyone?
Should we come back to you in a minute? Uh-oh. You're still muted.
Robert.
No audio. Okay, we'll come back to you.
Nice
We'll come back to you.
hair, Robert.
Uh-oh. Is your computer connected to audio?
It worked for, oh no, Robert
Okay.
didn't say anything.
All right. Wait 1 second. All right.
They need to hold down on the space bar.
This is my daily life as an educator on Zoom. Oh, wait, are you wanting to contribute in this discussion? What? Wait.
Oh my gosh, Sarah, I feel you. I have to teach now. It sucks.
It's great. All right, how's it going there, Leslie and Robert? Oh, wait. No? Oh, okay. All right. Okay, yeah, that's true. Leslie could call it in. No?
Can you hear us? No. Oh, there it is. Welcome.
We were
Okay,
sharing AirPods. It was very complicated.
Yeah. So, I have this. I can't remember his name for the life of me, but I remember Grandpa would always tell stories about his Native American friend and him. What is it? Ogo? Ungo. Yeah. That would go on adventures, and for some reason I always got a kick out of people making up stories on the spot and telling them to me. I would always pester Abe as well for more of his stories, and this was very much in the same vein as that. But I would always, I don't know. I remember like Johnny, sitting on his lap and hearing stories from Uncle Bob and always being so fascinated by every twist of the story that would begin with "Lo and behold." It was it's a really good memory of mine, but a collection of memories. I don't know.
Hi, everybody. It's really great to see everybody's faces. I owe some phone calls and I'm going to get there. But Bob was a really great father-in-law from day one. He was very accepting and kind. And I already told this story before, but I'll do it again. He would go on places with us on vacations and stuff and help with the children. But we went to Alaska and he came with us, and we had this one experience where we had to take this little boat and carry all this giant gear onto this island, and then we did it, and it was difficult, but he kind of kept us contained. And so, but anyway, we were in the morning, he and I were having coffee and watching the water, and a bear ran by, and then Quinn, the dog, chased the bear, and then I started to chase Quinn, and he just put his hand on my shoulder and looked at me and went like this. I said, "Oh, okay." And it was good to have that voice the reason. But he was like he was a great father-in-law. When you're showing your picture, I can say, "This, I have this on my refrigerator," and so yeah, I miss him. And he every birthday and Mother's Day he always sends me a text, so I will miss those. That's all.
That's great. Thank you. So many good love stories. And so funny. Any other stories or comments or thoughts?
Ungo's stories came from Grandpa.
From Robert T. originally.
Yeah, that's what Marilyn just chatted.
Mm-hmm. Right. He carried on tradition from his dad.
I remember Ungo stories when I was a little kid.
Me too. Can I say something? Hello.
Of course.
It's just kind of like the feeling. I think the loss that is the most uncomfortable for me right now is that there are things that I feel are stored only in Bob McFarlane's memory. Like they're just things I want to ask, things that I don't remember that I know he would have remembered. And it's just like, I'm not going to get those answers now. He's gone, and I just have to do the best I can with trying to remember the things about him that I can and you can, that we can collectively remember together about him. And it's so good to do this. It's like what we need, but it is hard to let go. It's easier to want to just say, maybe I'll, be able to see him again. Someday.
I'd like to say something. Well, I just want to first off say what an incredible tribute. The whole thing was just beautiful. The stories, the music, it was really, and the Amazing Grace on the bagpipe at the end as he fades off into the sunset. It was stunning. And, I heard a whole lot, when I was around at your home quite a bit and with your mom and dad quite a bit. And I heard a whole lot of those bad jokes and puns and stories and loved every one of them. And I heard a lot of that wonderful banjo, your mom's guitar, of course. But, it was after your mom was ill that I really learned a whole lot more about your dad. I learned a lot more about his heart and his love and his compassion. When they were at Terwilliger Plaza, Nancy McFarlane and I came up a couple of times to visit, and somebody, I don't remember if it was Sarah or Ann, if it was one of you, or if Bob had made a scrapbook and it had all of you in it and all of your names and pictures of lots of family things. And Betty she'd go through it and say, "Now, who is that?" And he'd say, "Well, that's Ann." And then she'd look at another picture and then she'd come back, "Now, who is that?" He'd say, just calmly, patient, over and over, "Oh, that's Ann, honey. That's Ann." It was phenomenal to watch. Just nothing but love, which of course, all the peace work that they did over their whole lives. But to see it just right there in that home between those two. And one other time when she had gone to the memory care unit, Nancy and I went over to play some music, and Bob was there, and I didn't know he was going to be there. And it was this amazing thing to sit there. It was just the four of us, Nancy and her fiddle and me and my guitar. And we were singing, Tonight I'd Like You to Rock Me to Sleep. I know you guys know that song. And the two of them were sitting over on the bench holding hands. And Betty couldn't quite sing it. She'd once in a while get a little bit. Your dad singing. And it was this phenomenally familiar setting, but everything was different. And yet the essence of that love and the caring of your father for your mother was just so heartwarming. And, you know, I'd seen it in lots of other ways, but boy, when it was hard like that, he was still just absolute love. And I so appreciated that about him, as well as all the funny stuff and the music and everything over the years, and his piecework, just inspiring. But man, that was a heart. I know you know that. So thank you for this beautiful, beautiful night.
Thanks, Nan.
Yeah.
I think the same thing about that time, because he was so patient, and he was also patient with us around the change, and so helpful, actually, even though he was so tired, and helping us see that people handle grief in really different ways, and they and appreciating the funny, but the everyday and the mundane and the regular in that whole process, and seeing it as a journey. And I learned so much, and I learned a lot from Dad on that, and he gave a lot, and had a hard time taking care of himself, which was hard for him because he was like hard worker and very dedicated, and getting him to take a little space for himself was hard for a long time, but lots of love. Thanks. And I loved seeing you playing when I go in there, and that was amazing because it would make Mom shine and Dad shine and me shine. Yeah. Anyone else have a thought or a story or a virtual hug? Well, we all have virtual hugs. Margaret?
Hi, I am once again back with just another like fun, fresh story. Ooh, sorry, I just saw myself. When we were in Alaska, I remember I was sitting next to Grandpa Bob. I think I was like 6 at this time. I was sitting at the table with Grandpa Bob across from my parents, and they suddenly were like, "Oh," and I was like, "What's wrong?" And we turned around, and there was a moose like right there, like very close. And it was super cool, but very also frightening. But Grandpa Bob made me feel so safe with a moose right in front of me. And he always had this quality that like made you feel safe and like loved and protected. And that's just the kind of grandpa he was. A really fly one. I'm gonna go now. Thank you.
All right. Well, are there any other stories? I'm feeling like maybe we've been online a while and we might be tired, but I really, I don't want to miss it if anybody else want to say something. But I'm feeling a lot of love for a lot of people and a lot of joy. I was telling my siblings and Julie, who helped us organize this, how joyful it was to do this work together, because I felt like I got to be with Dad, but also be with who I am as a part of Dad and who my siblings and all of us are as a part of that relationship. And so I have a lot of joy around that. And I want to say thank you to everybody for being here and sharing this with us, and share this with other people who couldn't be here tonight or who needed to be engaged and watch the vice presidential debate, which was a good thing to do tonight. And whatever it is, but other folks who might want to see it, there'll be a recording. But again, I don't want to miss if anybody else wanted to say something, but I just want to say we all love you, and Paul, James, and I are really appreciative of all your love and support at this time and throughout our lives to help us be who we are and to help our family be who we are. But we love you and thank you for being a part of this community and tonight. Do we feel like we're done? All right. Big hugs to everybody. Big
Big
virtual
hugs.
love
Big
everybody.
hugs.
Thank you for being a part of this joy.